Hello everyone. I'm sitting in my crawl space. It's April 2019, and this is the start of a very long project where I'm going to replumb my home. I'm going to replace all the copper with PEX. Last week I had to replace this shiny T up here because it was leaking. Prior to the leaking T, I had at least 6 to 8 pinhole leaks in my plumbing over the last 6-8 years. I had a plumber friend replace some of the bad copper with PEX, as you can see here.
What? Wait a minute! We haven't even talked about the plumbing yet!
No, we're not going to. Not with your attitude.
That's about as far as we got. In the 19 years I've been here, this is probably my 5th water heater. So I have no confidence in this copper anymore. I don't know how badly it's deteriorated on the inside.
I'm not trying to tell you your business, but you haven't even looked at my pipes.
I looked at them 3 years ago. You figure they've improved with age?
The leaks always come at the absolute worst time, and I just need to have a reliable system in my home. So I decided I'm going to replace the copper with PEX. I'm going to go with PEX-B, and I'm going to go with a Manabloc manifold system. So far, I determined that this piece of plywood, which I just put up last night, is where the Manabloc is going to go. The vast majority of plumbing in my home is all happening right here in this corner of the house, except for a garage hose, or rather a garage sink and a front hose over that way. So this made the most sense. This is also the only interior wall. So it never freezes down here. It's always about 50 degrees. Even if I lose power, it stays good down here. So this is where I'm at so far. I'm going to do updates as I go through. This video is not going to be a how-to. You're not going to see me changing pipes and all that. That's boring. You can find plenty of videos of that. What it's going to be is kind of like a video journal of how I did it, or what I did, what decisions I made. My plan is to mount the Manabloc and install PEX tubing on the master from the well and also the hot water heater, such that I still have my house getting water from the copper, but I will also have the Manabloc live. And then from that point, I can start cutting over the fixtures. The most challenging part of this is going to be the upstairs. There are a couple of pipes here that go through this wall up to the next floor, and then they go through the floor above my pantry and family room. So there's going to be a lot of drywall that gets cut out. Immediately after this video, I'll give you a quick overview of my existing plumbing, and then I'll give you updates as we step through it. 1 inch coming from the well, 1 inch PEX, goes through a check valve into a T, handles the bladder tank, comes out as 3/4 inch PEX to 3/4 inch copper. A couple of shark bites, water filter, wraps around and goes up to the house. After this shutoff valve, we have 1/2 inch hot and cold going up to the kitchen sink. There's a tap up there for the dishwasher, and this saddle valve for the refrigerator. Coming back over here, the larger 3/4 inch is cold. That comes down here to a T. We'll take a moment and say that these 1/2 inch hot and cold go out to the hose bib for the cold right there, and the washing machine valves up there. The 3/4 inch cold comes down, goes through shutoff valve into the hot water heater, comes back out through these stainless steel, and goes into 3/4 inch copper. That will come down this way, where we see 3/4 inch copper, hot and cold, going through that stud and then making a 90-degree turn up to go upstairs. Then the 1/2 inch copper, hot and cold, continues down to the garage sink and also the front hose bib. And that is the plumbing in this house. It's a couple days later, and I want to show you what I've been up to. This pad is my project roadmap, so to speak, all kinds of measurements and things about what I'm going to need for the project. But I've also been measuring where my existing fixtures are and trying to identify where the copper is. And so what I've been using is this inspection camera that I got from Harbor Freight, and it has been invaluable for this project. So what I did was I drilled some 1/2-inch holes at strategic locations in my drywall. Right here is the place where the 2 3/4-inch coppers come up the wall from my crawl space. So my recommendation, if you're doing something like this, is take lots of measurements, get something like this inspection camera so you can see what's going on, so you're not just cutting blindly into your walls. Just doing some prep for my cutover, and the brown truck arrived. Oh man, this is getting real. Four packs of 1/2-inch connectors. Pretty much like I expected. Down here in my crawl space, I mounted the Manabloc where I think I want it. I want to have some space up top here so I can do 90-degree turns on the tubes as they come out and go up through those studs. Down here, I may have to raise it another inch, but I think it's going to be all right. I made this temporarily, just kind of as practice. This is the cold water main, and this is a shut-off valve, so I can shut off all water coming into the Manabloc. Just seemed like a good idea to have that. I did a little playing around with my tools, made some connections, cut the rings, just so that if I have to do this live, I'll know what I'm doing. A couple of weeks have gone by, still down here in my man cave. I have made some preliminary connections for the water heater. I have those adapters ready that I did before. Same thing with the main. And over here, I've got everything all lined up. This row is my 3/8. Next row is all 1/2-inch. Got some 3/4. Just trying to get organized. Basically, this is probably the weekend where I'm going to get some time to come down here, turn off the house water, throw in these connections, and when I'm done, the Manabloc will officially have water. From that point, I can then start doing some connections. So we'll see how it goes. It's a Saturday afternoon, and I started my project. So I just soldered in these 2 adapters. They're a little angled, crooked on that, like that on purpose, so that I can get these flexible lines where they need to be without kinking them. And keep in mind, this is only temporary, because once I cut over to PEX only, these will be gone. Over here, I took off that U-shaped piece and soldered in what I needed for the water main. It's cooling right now, and then I'll be popping that on next. And here we are, just taking my time. The system has 50 pounds of water. I'm going in copper to my house. I'm going in PEX. Back here, around the water heater, and into the Manabloc. And then I've got my blue going into the water heater. I have a shut-off valve. I have my adapters. So I've got water coming into the water heater from both the copper and the Manabloc. And behind it, same thing, coming out of the water heater. Red going to the house, copper, and back into the Manabloc. So I now have this all ready to go, ready to start cutting fixtures over. So now that I'm live, I did one more thing today, and that was to cut the 2 1/2-inch coppers that go out to my garage sink and front hose and cap them off. And with that done, I'm going to make my first runs of PEX over to that area. Well, I'm ready to call it a day, and it has been a good day. I have my garage sink, hot and cold, as well as the front hose all connected. Very easy, just went up through the studs. The hardest part, a joist, I guess is the right word. The hardest part so far has been getting my old copper out, because it's just a pain cutting it. But I use these 45-degree, it's kind of hard to see, elbows to turn into the wall, and the hose is up there. That's a hose bib, frost-free deal. I'll show you what it looks like on the other side. So this is where the hose is in our garage, and obviously you can't even tell it's PEX on the other side of it. It just looks like a normal hose. Then under our garage sink, there is the PEX coming in. I got these little plastic escutcheons. I think I got those at Supply House, or maybe I got them on Amazon or something, but they're out there. And these valves, I got those at Supply House. Very easy to use, and just makes, you know, you don't have to have valves because you can shut everything off at the manifold, but you need some kind of connector here, and it just made sense economically to just get these valves. They're quarter turn, and they work real well. I just did my ice maker line. I was able to just turn the old one off because it has a turn off. There is a small brass connector on the end of the line from the refrigerator, which apparently is not a multi-use, you know, disconnect, reconnect kind of thing. But with a hairdryer and a little patience, I was able to get it out of the line. I should probably just replace it. But anyway, this is the valve. It's a pretty big valve from Supply House for an ice maker. It's 3/8 inch on the PEX side, and a regular, I guess, 1/4 inch MPT or whatever they call it on the other side. So I just drilled some 5/8 inch holes through my joists. I made sure to be at least 2 inches above the bottom of the joist per code, and came back over here to the block. When I have all this copper removed, I want to put this last bit through that hole. So for now, I just left a little extra play, and I'll just do that later at the end. But anyway, 4 down, 16 to go. Hey guys, Sunday night on my first PEX weekend, I wanted to do a video on where I am. I cut and capped my 1/2 inch copper. That is the hot, and the cold was all the way over here. And the reason why I had to do it here is because the cold came right off of this T. There really wasn't a lot of space to cut and cap. Anyway, with that done, I was able to run a cold up to my kitchen sink right through the floor. The reason why I have this loop here and the zip ties is just temporary. Because I'm kind of doing a live cutover, I have this copper pipe here still, and so I can't use the holes in the joist. But once that copper pipe comes out, this blue is going to get rerouted through that hole. The red, on the other hand, I was able to bring through the existing holes, go right up through the floor and under my sink. So the reason there's 2, one is the dishwasher. So let me zoom out and show you where I am now. Alright, so I'm just wrapping up for the end of this weekend. As you can see, I cleaned up after myself. That is definitely a huge plus when you're doing a job, is to clean up as you go. I hate working in dirt and filth. But that aside, here's where we are. I now have 7 connections on the Manabloc. Well, it's hard to believe. It's a Tuesday night, just 4 days after I started this project. My entire downstairs is now on the Manabloc. Tonight I attached my washer. Those are 1/2 inch. The hot went up that way, and the cold is one of those 1/2 inch ones on the bottom. On the other side of the water heater, you can see them coming up. The hot, I used a 90-degree elbow because I had that bend. The reason why I did the hot like that, I'm trying to preserve this space over here for a tankless water heater at some point. That circuit box will come out, and to the left of these drain pipes is where I would put it. So I'm trying to keep the PEX either way above or all the way down low away from it. And so that was why I did that. And so now it's just a matter of me cutting away drywall in the next room and taking a day to do the upstairs. So that's where we are for now. Welcome to the jungle. It's time to start the destruction. Everything's all covered. The room's been emptied. Time to start cutting the place up. Copper is exposed. The route for the 1/2 inch hot and cold through these two. Toilet there. Over here. Break off. Comes down here. For both sinks. Now it's time to vacuum. I did some drilling for where the hot water tubes are going to go. Pretty easy as long as you have a good hole saw. Did 1.25 inches here. There'll be 2 tubes going through each, a 1/2 inch and a 3/8. But one thing I wanted to point out, as you can see, looks pretty straightforward, right? But you really need to be careful when you're going into walls. I'm going to show you why. I mean, there you can see some electric wires. Notice the holes I drilled here. We're going to go around the other side. That there is 230 volts to my electric range. If I drilled through those, it could have been a really bad day. So really know where you're going. Be careful. So I'm in my upstairs now, bathroom. There's a bathroom on the other side of this wall, so I have cut away and exposed the copper to both sinks and to both toilets. This is the access way to both tubs. You can see the one there. So the way that one is, you can see it's all soldered in 1/2 inch copper. I actually just replaced these tub valves 5 months ago. Did not expect to be back in here, but that's the way it goes. So what I did tonight was I turned off my newly installed ball valves and cut the copper. Completely removed the piece for the shower and the tub. I took out all the rubber pieces, and those are my knees cracking. I removed the 1/2 inch copper and soldered in these adapters for the PEX. So now all I'll need to do is clip on and crimp the PEX. I'm going to leave the copper for these two parts. It's obviously only going to carry water when using the shower and tub, which is only a few minutes a day. Not concerned about that. So that's that. It's the night before PEX. So I did the second tub valve tonight. Both of them now have the PEX connectors on them. And since I had a clear path up here with the red tubing, because it's not going through the holes where the copper is right now, I ran 2 of them, one for each valve. So let me see, get this in here a little better. So you can see how that comes up. I'm using these angle connectors. I wanted to keep it, on the stud side, so I could put the connector there to keep it attached to the stud and just give myself a lot of extra PEX in case I needed to re-clamp or anything. So tomorrow morning, the house gets drained. The 3/4 inch copper coming up to upstairs will get cut and capped, and then it's showtime. Tear out all the copper, replace it with PEX. So I'll start by finishing up these tubs. The valves need to be reassembled, and then I can test them, and then I can do the sinks and the toilets. So today's the day. Got the copper capped off. It was very easy to do it here instead of between floor joists in the crawl space. I made what I call a jig. The hole on the right is 1.5 inch, which is the size I need, and I have that positioned right over the existing hole, which is around 1.25. So it's just serving as a guide. I'm using this for my hole cutter. Probably not the greatest choice, but I did one already. Just got to do one more, and then I think maybe 2 there, and that should do it for making holes bigger. Then I can pull PEX blue to my baths. I am about 4 hours into the project today, and I am almost done. The only thing left are 2 blues to go to the toilet upstairs. So I did the top 2, which are the 1/2 inch on each side for the tubs. Then the next 2 on each side are the 3/8 inch for the bathroom sinks. Out here, it's getting nice and colorful. When I'm all done, I'm going to use some zip ties to just pull these tubes together in groups. I didn't really want to nail them into the studs because it was pulling them all in a direction I didn't want for where they go into the Manabloc. So this worked out good. The first blue with you can see it has 3 tubes going through it. The 1/2 inch go down to the tubs, and then the smaller ones continue onto the sinks. That worked out. So it just kind of continues along. I didn't talk about this, but there's the ground wire that used to be attached to my copper. You obviously don't need it with PEX, but what I decided to do was just spend 25 bucks on a roll of similar ground, as well as getting a jumper. I'm going to connect it. I'm just going to run it back down into this crawl space. I'll probably connect it to the metal tubes on the hot water heater. I don't think that's specifically necessary, but it doesn't make sense to me to leave this buried up in the ceiling because you never know. One day I might need it. So while everything's open, just run it. And then finally, this is where these tubes go into the sinks. Very easy, didn't have to make the holes any bigger. And so all I have left are a couple runs of the toilets. Well, about 6.5 hours working on this today. And we're done. All 20 fixtures are installed. There's that ground wire I was telling you about. So here it is at the end of my long day. Hard to believe it's actually all done because of everything that went into getting to this point. Next will be to remove those temporary adapters I put on there and just go straight PEX into these stainless steel tubes into the water heater. And then I'm also going to uncoil that, remove the remaining copper there, and go straight to PEX all the way through. Alright, so this is how everything ended up. Looks really good. Goes right down that way. Much cleaner than it was with the copper. It's 4 weeks to the day since I hung my Manabloc, and I am done. This is my garage post-project. Over here I've got valves. Still processing this copper. You want to cut the copper up in 2 categories. This is all copper number 1, they call it, which is no solder or anything, just nice clean pieces of copper. And then this is considered copper number 2, which is all solder joints and things like that. So I'm just kind of going through here and separating this stuff. If there was any question in my mind about whether I needed to do this project, it was answered when I started looking at the condition of my pipes. This was the T I showed in the beginning that was just replaced. That's a good looking piece. That's actually new piece of copper. That's how thick it should be. This is what was coming out of one end of it. This was so thin and fragile I couldn't even cut it with a regular copper cutter, tubing cutter, as you can see. I ended up just bending it with my hand. So this could have been days or weeks away from being my next pinhole leak or burst pipe. I mean, that is just scary thin. And I found a couple of pieces that were in that kind of condition. So there was no doubt in my mind this was a good thing to do. So let me show you the finished product. Actually, before I show you the finished product, it's very important that the PEX tubes be secured. You can see I've got them zip tied. They're secured here going through the joists, but the lengths that run down through these cavities, I used the clips that they make for PEX tubing. Because PEX does move around, it also expands and contracts from heat. The red will. I'm not really happy with those foam things. I'm going to replace them with something better. You don't want those tubes rubbing up against anything sharp. In some ways, it feels like this project is never going to be done, but I mean, really, for purposes of this video, we're done. I'll show you what I did today. I took away the copper that I used to have here, and now I have just a couple elbows. I go into my filter. I loop around using these angle supports. I've used these angle supports everywhere possible instead of elbows. I like having unbroken PEX lines. This goes down to the ground. I threw a 2x4 down there with a couple of clips on it just to keep things a little secure. Swinging back to the other side. Grab a light. I have some more clips on the main coming across and going up into the block. Just want to keep everything nice and tight. The other thing I did was I rerouted the cold blue that went to the kitchen sink through the existing holes once I got rid of the copper, so that's all done. You can see more clips. I used some of this foam insulation here just to keep the hot and the cold away from each other. I used some up here on a group of reds that I had, primarily because of this metal thing, which is kind of sharp, so that's something I'll keep an eye on. But pretty much everything all throughout the house is nice and tight, and I don't see any places where the PEX is going to be making noise. As far as the water heater goes, same deal, took all the copper out. I had to run to Home Depot, which unfortunately is an hour round trip, and get another one of these shark bite tubes because the one that I had just wasn't sealing. And this is a new piece of copper. I had made sure it was all deburred and everything, but the new one went on perfectly, nice and dry. So I did get to use my cold water supply valve immediately because the hot water heater was pushing water out of there. So I just turned it off and we had at least cold water. So the block is done. I've got a few extra ports if I ever need them. Don't expect to. Overall, in my project, as I said, I tried to use as many of these angles as possible and eliminate any joints. I actually have no joints. I just go home runs straight from here to the fixtures without any additional crimps. The only crimps that I really have that are additional ones are over here. So that's pretty much it. So that's a good thing to do. All in all, much better thing, I think, to have in my house instead of the copper. And as I mentioned, I want to get a tankless water heater at some point. So I moved the electric water heater out of the way. Hopefully we can throw that in at some point. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching. I hope this was educational. If you have a project like this that you're thinking of doing, you can definitely tackle it. You just need to do a lot of research and planning ahead of time, and then you can do it basically one fixture at a time. Have fun. There's only one way to finish off this project. Right there, baby.